The god of the Republican Party is the most recent defeated presidential candidate who gave his first post-presidency speech in Florida this weekend and did not say anything about governing policy. Nothing. He didn't say whether he still believes that struggling Americans should be getting another round of COVID relief checks in a COVID relief bill. He didn't say anything about whether Republicans should be for or against increasing the minimum wage, because Republicans as a party stand for nothing, absolutely nothing. No governing principle, no governing issue, and that means governing now is entirely up to Democrats, governing in Washington. Passing a COVID relief bill is entirely up to Democrats. And the argument about including an increase in the minimum wage to $15 in the COVID relief bill is an argument among Democrats only. The Senate parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, who was appointed to her job by the Democratic Majority Leader Harry Reid in 2012, has ruled that a minimum wage increase cannot be included in a budget reconciliation bill according to the unique rules of the Senate. And everyone in the Senate has always assumed that a minimum wage increase could not be allowed in a budget reconciliation bill, which is why the Democrats have never tried to raise the minimum wage in a reconciliation bill. Many new members of the House of Representatives who are working on their very first budget reconciliation bill of their careers have been shocked to discover that the rules of the Senate, as interpreted by the Senate parliamentarian, can get in their way. This is a very common experience for members of the House to have this profound irritation, to put it mildly, with the Senate parliamentarian. Last night, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this.
We should override the parliamentarian. I think that this is a matter of course, and that our constituents and people across this country put Democrats in power to, among many other things, establish a $15 minimum wage. We have a responsibility to do that. Our two options are realistically this: override the parliamentarian or eliminate the filibuster. Those are the only two paths that we have in order to actually create substantive change in the United States, and that is what people across the country sent us here to do.
Sounds simple enough, override the parliamentarian, and it can be done. But last week, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain told Joy Reid that Vice President Kamala Harris would not overrule the Senate parliamentarian. White House announced last week they wouldn't do that. And today, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said it again.
Well, the decision for the vice president to vote to overrule or to take a step to overrule is not a simple decision. It would also require 50 votes. As you know, it's not a one-step decision. And the president and the vice president both respect the history of the Senate. They are both formerly served in the Senate, and that's not an action we intend to take.
And so even with the White House repeatedly saying, no, Vice President Harris will not overrule the Senate parliamentarian, members of the House of Representatives continue to push for that to happen. Here is Congresswoman Jayapal with Joy Reid earlier tonight.
I think that the parliamentarian should be overruled. That is not unprecedented, as you know. Hubert Humphrey did it in 1967 and 1969. Roosevelt did it in 1975. These are certainly unprecedented times where we could thank the parliamentarian for her opinion. It is an advisory opinion, and then we could still include it in the minimum wage bill.
Pramila Jayapal is absolutely right about all of that. The parliamentarian's opinion is just an advisory opinion, but she did misspeak there when she said that Vice President Roosevelt did it in 1975. She meant Vice President Rockefeller in 1974. But that's the last time it happened, 46 years ago. So there's nothing more rare in the United States Senate than overruling the parliamentarian. I think it was actually 47 years ago. And in this case, it cannot work as a way of passing the minimum wage. Cannot possibly work because the Democrats don't have enough votes among the Democrats to pass the minimum wage after Vice President Harris overrules the parliamentarian, which they've already announced she's not going to do. But let's go along with it. If Vice President Harris overruled the Senate parliamentarian and allowed the minimum wage to be included in the reconciliation bill, then Mitch McConnell would simply offer an amendment to remove the minimum wage from the reconciliation bill. And the Democrats would lose that vote. At least two Democrats, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, would vote against including the minimum wage in the reconciliation bill. And it is actually possible that a few other Democrats might join them in that vote. Earlier tonight, in an interview with Rachel Maddow, Senator Elizabeth Warren said this.
If we say that we're going to get rid of the filibuster, we are going to go with majority rule the way the Constitution holds for the House and the Senate, and we can actually pass the things we need to pass, then this isn't an issue.
So get rid of the filibuster is the suggestion from Senator Warren about how to pass the minimum wage. But there are ways to raise the minimum wage without using a budget reconciliation bill or getting rid of the Senate filibuster, because that's the way the minimum wage has always been raised, without using budget reconciliation and without getting rid of the Senate filibuster. And we are joined tonight by a master of the Senate to help guide us through the options. Leading off our discussion tonight, Jim Manley, a 21-year veteran of the United States Senate who served as an advisor to Majority Leader Harry Reid and to the chairman of the Senate Labor Committee, Senator Ted Kennedy. Also with us, Jason Johnson, professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State University. He is an MSNBC political analyst and host of the new podcast, A Word with Jason Johnson, for Slate. Jim, let's begin with the Senate options. The get rid of the filibuster, which has become kind of the easy throwaway line, that we already know is impossible because Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema have said they absolutely will not vote to do that. But and I've outlined why trying to get this into reconciliation won't work, because Mitch McConnell can strip it out with an amendment if you did overrule the parliamentarian. The last time the minimum wage was raised, it was just squeezed into a defense spending bill at the last minute, and that's the kind of way, that's the way it was done in the past, is just stuck on to must-pass bills that then Republicans vote for. And in fact, the last time they raised it, George Bush was president, 2007, Republican presidents signed it because it was inside a giant bill with military funding in it.
Well, I just so happened to be working for Senator Kennedy, the author of that last minimum wage bill, when we did this. And it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, you know, we begin with the premise that he spent more than a year stalking the Senate floor, looking for attempts to offer amendments to raise the minimum wage. I put together more press conferences than thought humanly possible, designed to try and highlight the need to get it done. And then at some point, and we were dealing with a guy by the name of John Boehner, who at that point in time was the chairman of the Educational Workforce Committee, who was dead set against doing anything on the minimum wage. But when push comes to shove, he was offered a compromise that included tax breaks for small business. God, Kennedy hated that idea because we'd never done it before. But that's the art of compromise. That's what it takes to try and get things done. So for the life of me, your opening segment, you nailed it correctly. I mean, none of these options being discussed are going to work. All of them end up being losing, some more than others. So, yes, let's get Senator Manchin in the room. Let's get Republicans in the room. Let's try and figure out a compromise. And if they can't do it, let's blame them. But first of all, we got to take the first step and put the onus on these guys to deliver. And I'm talking about Senator Manchin as well.
Mm-hmm. Jason Johnson, so Ron Klain said last Wednesday to Joy Reid, no, we're not going to overrule the Senate parliamentarian. And that is a White House call, because it would be Vice President Harris who would have to do it, sitting in the presiding officer's chair. Then the White House says again today, Jen Psaki, we're not going to do that. They couldn't be more clear. And yet, members of the House of Representatives continue to say, overrule the parliamentarian. What's going on? Is there a communication disconnect here?
Lawrence, I have to say, as your other guest mentioned, your opening was brilliant. It was brilliant because I think there's some basic civics and government classes that certain members of Congress have not followed up on. This is a little bit beyond Schoolhouse Rock, right? At the end of the day, you have sort of people in the House. And again, the House is supposed to be that. Philosophically, the House is the rabble. It's the passion. It's the people. Do it, do it, do it. The Senate is the deliberative body. And at the end of the day, yes, they could try and get rid of the filibuster. That's not going to work. Manchin and Sinema don't want that to happen. If you fire the Senate parliamentarian, as you said, Mitch McConnell will just say no, and then you'll have an embarrassing vote to yank the minimum wage out. You can't blow everything up right here, right now on this particular issue. And quite honestly, Lawrence, long term, I actually think this works for Democrats. They can keep fighting for the $15 minimum wage for the next year and a half and blame it on Republicans all they want. Passing this bill now is the immediate relief that people need, and fighting for the $15 minimum wage, which, by the way, has passed in many states throughout the country, is still an issue they can fight for. I think this is sort of a short-term thinking by really passionate, well-intentioned people in the House of Representatives who may not understand the long-term strategy that might be at play in the Senate.
Well, some of them have said, and I get this, that the parliamentarian, the moment with the parliamentarian hasn't happened until it happens. And so we're going to continue to lobby on this right up until the moment when the parliamentarian's moment on the Senate floor happens and Vice President Harris has that decision to make. So I get, I think, why they are continuing to put this pressure on, even though the White House has said they're not going to do it. But we are definitely going to have a vote on the Senate floor on the minimum wage. And Bernie Sanders has told us how. He has tweeted tonight, this week, as part of the reconciliation bill, I will be offering an amendment to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And Jim, this is exactly the way we would expect this to play in the Senate. Chuck Schumer won't have the minimum wage in the bill that he brings to the floor because he knows how the parliamentarian is going to rule. And so what will happen is there will be this Sanders amendment offered, and it will take 50 votes to pass it, plus Vice President Harris's vote if they can get there, and that'll tell you right there if the Democrats can do it.
Yep, absolutely, and to that I'd say it's about damn time somebody figured out the strategy. Just try and move the amendment process. It piggybacks off. So I'm glad that Senator Sanders made this announcement tonight, but it piggybacks off of what I tried to say earlier, what Kennedy did. It doesn't have to be a one-off. This can be the beginning of, as Jason suggested, a series of pressure tactics designed to try and put Republicans on the defensive and try and figure out a way to try and cut a deal. Maybe it's not going to be the 15, maybe it's going to be 12.50 or whatever, again, paired with tax breaks for the wealthy. But again, I was encouraged that Senator Sanders made this announcement tonight, and and I can only hope it's going to be the first of many attempts to try and put Republicans in a very difficult position, because after all, this is a pretty popular position in many states of trying to vote against the minimum wage increase, just like it used to happen.
Yeah, and Jason, I think the House members by this time know what they're dealing with and what their likelihood is down to in the 1% range of overruling the parliamentarian. But at this stage of the argument, that seems to be the best way for them to kind of keep this discussion alive, which is the House way of putting pressure on senators. They're hoping that somehow they're going to deliver some kind of pressure to Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema.
Yeah, and this is actually the smart thing to do. Some of this is a lack of understanding, but like I said, some of this is the House's job. There needs to be a minimum wage increase in the United States of America. Just period, right? Minimum wage today, it's lost, 18% of its value since the last minimum wage increase. We are in the middle of a pandemic where people have lost hundreds of thousands of jobs and whole families are being supported by one person on minimum wage. I mean, there is a legitimate urgency here. But the House's best option is to continue to pressure. And even if they throw out unrealistic ideas, it's part of a larger, I think, pressure on Joe Biden to say, look, incrementalism is not going to get us out of this COVID mess. OK, Donald Trump was not an incrementalist. He tore down everything to push through whatever policies he wanted. And I think Democrats across the board want to see that kind of bold action from Joe Biden. So on that end, I can never disagree with people who want Joe Biden to make big moves in the face of a once in a century crisis that this country is facing.
And Jim, before we go, I just want to say I can remember Senator Kennedy. It was a lonely quest in those days, trying to get attention to the minimum wage. Even Democrats thought they had bigger things to deal with, and it was very, very hard to do it. Here we have a visibility that I'm not sure the minimum wage increase has had in decades. This is an urgency level and a visibility we haven't seen before. We're going to find out what that's worth politically going forward. Jim Manley, Professor Jason Johnson, thank you very much for starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it.